So I'd like to thank you for joining me today. I love water for elephants, and I'm also going to Ball State, so I'm super excited to have you on. Uh,
Yeah,
and
for sure.
so, yeah, and so starting off, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself for those who don't know who you are?
Yeah, so my name's Zach, and I actually grew up in the Chicago suburbs. So I got into theater because all three of my older siblings did it. So I was like, I'll just copy whatever they do. And I'm actually the only one who stuck with it. But yeah, so I got into it because of them, and then pretty soon, once I got into it, I auditioned for a touring production of Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. And I booked it, woohoo, but it actually didn't end up it happening. It got canceled, and that was how I got connected with my agent, Great Talent there. And so I've been working with them for I think it's like 17 years now or something like that. So got connected with them, started doing a lot of theater in the Chicago regional theater scene and commercials as well. And then I ended up going to Ball State. I very late in my senior year, I decided I was like, I want to actually do this and not do advertising. And so then I joined. Or I could only audition at schools that I had already applied to, and by luck, I applied to Ball State, where my dad also went to school. And so I was able to audition there, and yeah, ended up going there. Had a great time, learned a lot, and then graduated in 2020 during the pandemic. So that was a weird year to graduate, but
Yeah.
decided to go home for a bit, saved up, and then moved to New York, and struggled there for a bit. Had a did a couple of regional theater gigs here and there, but then eventually was fortunate enough to start working on some projects that I was really excited about. So that kind of leads me to Water for Elephants.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so, before we jump into a little bit about Water for Elephants, I want to talk about your past experience. As you mentioned, you studied at Ball State University, where you got your BFA. And so, what did your studies at Ball State University help you, and how did they help you improve as an artist?
Uh, you know, I think it definitely pushed me outside my comfort zone in terms of, I was never really a dancer. I still probably wouldn't identify as a dancer, a strong mover though. But it got me outside of my comfort zone in terms of that. And now, um, I use a lot of those skills. I think the cabaret class that we have our senior year was also very influential for me because it really teaches you how to be creative. You do a lot of mashups of songs, and I think the best creativity sort of lies in boundaries and identifying those boundaries and setting those boundaries so that you're not just creating from a blank space, but you have this sandbox to play in. And that class taught me a lot of that. I think also too, it was the first time really being on my own and being independent, which is just a natural thing when you go to college, is that you learn how to do that. Luckily, I knew how to do laundry, but a lot of my friends they had never done laundry before, so they
Yeah.
were going to school and learning how to do things like that. And I certainly had a lot of experiences like that as well. Met a lot of great people that it helped build a strong network of fellow performers and creators that I still, keep in touch with today. And um, I think I was fortunate enough to have a lot of great opportunities at Ball State where I got to play a lot of different types of characters. At one point I was playing the dad in Fun Home, but at another point I was playing the ugly stepmother in Cinderella the ballet. So every experience that I had at Ball State was wildly different from each other, and it really expanded what I could do as an actor that wasn't just playing someone close to home, someone that was like me. So yeah, I would say that was probably the biggest takeaway.
Yeah, for sure. And like the dad in Fun Home, he's such a complex character to play as well. Like it's not a simple role that you can just easily take on. There's so many sides of that character specifically that you have to like look at while playing him. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's true. It was a tough role, but I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. And so over the course of your performance history, you've got to work with some amazing people like Sutton Foster, Rachel Hoffman, Bill Oztek, and Peggy Roder. And so how did working with a lot of the artists help your craft as an artist?
Yeah, I think when you work with people who are so successful in their specific part of the industry, it really helps sort of normalize it. So, uh, you know, you sort of recognize that they're just real people, that they have their own lives, and that uh, it takes some of the shine out of it, so that you're not so nervous when you're you know working with these people. Since graduating, I've gotten to work with a lot of really awesome people. Recently, I did a workshop with like Stephen Pasquale, who's like uh, you know a a big inspiration for me. And, he's biking to work, which is such a normal thing to think about. But, it's such a cool experience to be able to do that. But also just recognize that, like, these people have interests outside of the industry, which is so incredibly important and something that I didn't really learn until the ripe age of 27, what I am now, is that like you need to have interests outside of this industry to keep you sane. And I think also too, obviously they taught me how to bring, especially Sutton, I could think about, she helped with our cabaret class, how to bring your authentic self to the work that you're doing. um, and how that's so important. I think a lot of times nowadays, especially in musical theater, it's okay, what track can I fit into? Am I more an Aaron Tveit, or am I more of a Jeremy Jordan? Am I more of this or that? And even at school, they tell you, oh, try to think of three people that your career you could follow. But the thing is, you have to really know who you are. And one thing that I've started to realize is like, okay, I'm not that high belty tenor. I'm more of like, I like to float things. And you know, uh, I think I think those people, working with those people, they really taught me how to embrace what what I bring to the table. I read Green Lights, a book by Matthew McConaughey, and he says that figuring out your identity is actually is like eliminating what you're not. And I think that's what a lot of my 20s has been about, is eliminating what I'm not. I'm not the dancing person. I'm not the high belty person, and that's okay. I don't have to be everything. I should really embrace what I like to do and what I'm good at, and bring that to the table. So that's what working with those people kind of taught me.
Yeah, for sure, that's great. And so over the course of your performance history, once again, you've played a bunch of different types of roles like Lee Turner and John Proctor, Dale in To Kill a Mockingbird, Little Boy in Ragtime. And so, has there been a role that has stood out to you of, man, that was a really important role for me to play?
There's definitely a couple that come to mind. I think Water for Elephants has certainly been one. Playing Jacob, you know, getting to lead a national tour has been such a rewarding experience. Um, and there are days where it feels like work. There are days where you're tired, but you know, not only have I learned so many new skills in terms of like circus skills, but I've gotten to interact with a lot of circus people, which is a completely different culture than I'm used to. And you know, it helps me realize that there's a world outside of musical theater. Um, and I think it's pushing me in a way that, okay, what does it mean to lead a show? Um, you know, I try to look at it that I'm, uh, that I, it's like I think a lot of people who become actors can be a little egocentric, and I certainly have fallen into that trap as well. But it's been a lesson in how do you release that? How do you make sure that your performance is about giving the audience an experience and not just serving your own ego. So that's been one. I think Fun Home was one for me as well. Realizing that I could. That was the first time that I had like a really complex role. That wasn't just like, look at me, I'm doing musical theater. It was like an actual in-depth role where you're playing a real person, and it was a real challenge. And I ended up exploring method acting a little bit, which don't recommend to anyone. It's there's value to it, but also you have to have boundaries, very clear boundaries. So that was a really cool role as well. I loved doing Spring Awakening. I played Melchior at Flint Repertory Theater, and that was a fun time. I just love that show. And that taught me a lot on how to lead a show as well. So I'd say those three.
Yeah, for sure. And then, as you mentioned, you are leading the Water for Elephants national tour as Jacob right now. And so, what was the audition process like for this show?
It was a unique audition process for me. I first was introduced to the show because my friend was actually on the costuming department, or within the costuming department, and so I went and saw the show to support her. And I remember thinking like, oh man, I feel like I could do that role in a couple of years. And then I was actually working on Spring Awakening at the time, and I was in Michigan, and I submitted a self tape for the Broadway replacement. And I was actually uh, uh, don't tell the directors this, but I used a teleprompter actually, and I use that sometimes for auditions because it's hard to memorize so much stuff, and
Yeah, for
so a
sure.
lot of times that can actually free you up. Um, so that's a good tip for people. But um, yeah, so I remember just being in my uh, was basically a college dorm, filming that with a friend, and sending it out, not thinking much of it. And then I got a call back. And so I flew out to New York, did the call back, and I felt really good about it. But it was weird being in that space and being with, in the callback room and being like, oh, that person was in, the original cast of Bring It On, and that person was in, XYZ. And so that was a surreal experience. And it didn't work out then, but I did get a message back from the cast, and it was like, you know, we love him, but we're going a different direction right now, but we're gonna find something for him, which I'd never heard that before.
Yeah, that's
And so, yeah, yeah, it's sort of something different. You always hear, oh, we're going a different direction. That's the typical what you hear, but that I'd never heard before, and I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. Um, I was like, maybe for an understudy or whatever, but then it ended up closing, so I was like, ah, man. And then the tour came back around, and I what I was very blessed with is that I was able to go just the final round of callbacks. And yeah, I went into the room, and it was, what typically when you go in the room, there are a lot of people there. So it was the director, Jessica Stone, the assistant director, the music supervisor, the producer, I think there was people from the original music team. There was lots of people in there, and I just remember singing Anywhere, and at one point they had me get on my knees to do it because I'm singing at the top of scaffolding
yeah.
while doing that number. So they were just testing out to see if I could do it in that kind of hunched over position. And I felt really good about that. And I remember they gave me a lot of great notes. Um, we were doing one of the scenes, and they were talking to me. It was a scene between me and Marlena, the leading lady. And it was the first moment that they speak, and they were like, "You're playing it very suave, like you are, uh, you know, like you're too suave." And I was like, "Okay, okay." And then yeah, they were like, "Yeah, he's a virgin, so remember that. Keep that in mind." I was like, "Okay." All right. And so then I made that adjustment and I remember them laughing. And yeah, it felt like a really good adjustment and everything. And I left the room and it did feel different. It was like, I was like, I felt really good about that. But, it's in God's hands now. And if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And I felt good about that audition, and that's what matters. And then I got the call like 2 days later, I think, and they were like, "Hey, you want to do this?" And I was like, "Hell yeah!"
Yeah. That's an amazing journey. And so, I don't know how long the tour's been going. It's recently new. I mean, relatively. So is there a tour stop that you're looking forward to in the upcoming months, as you continue to tour with the show?
I think Chicago is a big one that I'm really excited for. Obviously, because my family's there. Like I know that my old high school choir director is going to come, and so I'm really stoked for that.
What theater is it in? Do you know?
It's at the Nederlander, I
Oh,
believe.
nice. Beautiful theater. Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I'm really stoked for Chicago. That's a big one. I feel like all the big ones have sort of already happened. I'm excited to get over to California for LA. We're there for 3 weeks, I think. San Francisco will be nice. We eventually get up to Seattle
Oh.
and Portland, which I love the West Coast, so I'm really excited for that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so when you were auditioning for the show originally, were you familiar with the material in it? Like, had you seen the show on Broadway before you auditioned? And if so, if not, what was your experience finding out about the show?
Yeah, I had seen it before, and I remember really enjoying it, and especially the visual elements to it. It's a very entertaining show. Um, and then I remember when I booked it, they sent over like a professional filmed version of it. So I got to watch it and just being like, I was watching it with my parents and just being like, wow, like I'm about to go do that
Yeah.
and feeling like very blessed, and just um, feeling very grateful. And it's been so interesting as soon as you're put into it too. Like the rehearsal process was really interesting. Being like, okay, so I am going to be hanging from a trapeze while singing. I had to like train in that way, and I what I would do is the dream is the final number, and it's really a tough song. But I remember I like to train for it for a month before I would run while singing, and then hang from a pull-up bar to kind of mimic what I would be doing,
Yeah.
and that really helped. It helped condition me for that. But yeah, that's sort of the experience from watching it to
Yeah.
doing it.
Yeah, for sure. And like, as you said, this is a very entertaining show with all the circus, trapeze and stuff. So is there a specific scene or musical number that you look forward to performing each night?
I would say, it's shifted as the tour's gone along. I used to really love the duet Wild. Um, and not that I don't anymore. It's just I think other songs have sort of taken place. I always love doing Anywhere. It's always a fun one, the beginning of the show, and you just kind of get to like belt, which is always kind of fun. But I do really enjoy The Dream. That's a really fun one, just because it's like a very emotional moment, and there's a lot of different like parts of my voice that I get to use for it. I try to look at singing like painting with colors, and so I get to use a lot of different colors in that song.
Yeah, for sure. And this show has a variety of performers, from musical theater performers to circus performers. And so what was it like getting to work with people who are normally circus performers who are stepping into that musical theater side of things?
It was fascinating because, especially early on in the process, we would see them doing, flips and throwing people around and doing trapeze and aerial work. And we're like, wow, like that's amazing. And they would see us acting or singing, and they'd be like, whoa, that's amazing. I remember one moment, like, I get shoved around by one of the circus performers, and he shoved me, and I like reacted as an actor does. And he was like, "Oh my God, are you okay?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I was just acting. You're good. You're good." So it was, it's really interesting, like how you come from two different worlds, and a lot of the circus performers are from, many different parts. Some are from Spain, some are from Mexico, some are from, you know, any there's some are from the US, some are from one's from French Guiana. So it's like there's such a mix of cultures, and it's really interesting to learn about how circus performing is similar and how it's different. Um, so it definitely keeps things interesting, and the circus performers have been working with me so that I can learn some new skills. So my next goal is to learn how to juggle and do a handstand.
Nice,
So we're
nice.
slowly getting there.
Yeah. And so along with being on stage, you've also been on screen in different film and TV projects. And so what's different? Because it's different for each person. So for you personally, what's different from working on screen in like Chicago Med or Shameless rather than being on stage in a show like Ragtime, To Kill a Mockingbird, etc.?
Obviously, I think like the big one that everyone always points out is it's a lot more subtle. Um, in theater, you have to sort of project not only your voice but also sort of your emotions and you know uh, movement, gestures. And I think with film, you have to veil it, is what I learned. So like you veil it just to like if I'm like pissed and I'm gonna be like putting my arms up like this is a very theatrical move. Whereas like if I veil it and veil it and veil it, and then it can just get smaller and smaller so that because the camera picks up everything. So you have to veil it. I think that's the biggest thing. Um, with doing TV, what I've noticed is that you're sort of like plugged in to like this big machine, you're like, or like you're just hopping on the train for a second while, you know, everyone's got their part to play in TV. So that's sort of what I've noticed about TV. And I think like managing your energy is a big thing on a TV and film set. If you have a very emotional number coming up, you can't give it all in one take. You got to kind of you have to pace yourself in a way that you don't with theater. In theater, it's like once I get to the emotional moment of the dream at the end, it's I've had 2 hours before that to kind of prep myself for that.
Yeah.
Whereas with TV and film, it's like, all right, today we're going to start off with the end emotional scene, and then we're actually going to do the opening shot, and then we're going to go to the middle of the film. So it's like you are just constantly managing where you're coming from, and you have to remind yourself, all right, where is this scene coming from, and where is it going to? Because that informs how I'm going to approach this scene.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Uh, and so as you mentioned, this is you're leading the national tour of waterfall elephants. And so what are some of the lessons you've learned from touring around the country with the show?
I think that some of the biggest lessons I've learned is like how to keep yourself sane, how to find the consistencies outside of there's nothing consistent. You don't have the same gym that you're going to. You don't have the same coffee shop that you go to. You don't have the same friends that you always see. So you're having to make do with what you have. And I think that finding routines that keep you grounded is really important. We've started a Bible group in our cast. We've I've made my routines of reading my Bible very important. I've made my routines of working out on a regular basis and making sure that I'm creating outside of the show so that I don't get stale with the show. I think that's really important, and it's actually afforded me a lot of. It's afforded me some hobbies. Now I'm starting to get into photography. I'm starting to get into songwriting, and I carry my guitar with me everywhere, which is such a pain in the butt, but I carry it with me. But um, it's I've gotten into a lot of different hobbies because of it. So I think you just kind of have to find the things that keep you sane. And I spend way too much money on coffee, but it gets me out of the hotel. It gets me out of the Airbnb. so that I can um, not go crazy,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And so moving on from your experience as an actor, what advice would you give to younger performers who want to do acting professionally?
I would say remember why you got into it in the first place, which sounds so basic and contrived, but I think that I originally got into acting not just because my older siblings did it, but because I loved putting on performances for my parents as a kid. I would my brother and I had bunk beds, and we would set up a curtain on the bunk bed and have my parents sit on the bunk bed, and then we would like open the curtain and do a show for them, which was basically my brother dancing, or my brother singing and me just like galloping around him, but saying that that was dancing. But I think a lot of what I started to notice is that as soon as I went to college for it, it became very ego driven. It became about succeeding. It became about the validation that I got from it. It became about the applause, the awards, the recognition, the people saying good job, you know, and while validation, everyone needs it. You have to make sure that you have a healthy relationship with that. And so I think just making sure that you remember that why it is you do it. And I think that remember the child and connecting with the child part of you, because some people start to treat it too seriously, and then that honestly it locks you up as an actor, but also it makes it way less enjoyable. So just remember to have fun, basically.
Yeah, for sure. That's good advice. And so that actually wraps up the interview today. I'd like to thank you for joining me.